What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, we're back again talking Scream 7 and a new article that's come out that I think continues to muddy the water, but also does, potentially at least, give some pretty good information on this stuff, and we get to hear a little bit more about the money, and then very interesting line that's thrown in the article that I think people are taking a variety of different ways online in terms of a reboot. So I want to structure this video as rebooting this thing, okay, I think would be an absolutely terrible idea at this point in the road. And I think from my interaction with a lot of you, I think we're generally on the same page that I don't know who's suggesting that they completely blow it up and restart. I feel like what you get is people either mad at obviously what happened with Melissa and Jenna, maybe people that care, don't care, and they're willing to kind of see it through for, something else. But the thing that connects everybody, I feel like, is whether you still want to see Scream, like you probably want Sydney back. I don't see many people saying, okay, let's just literally start at ground zero and just, blow the whole thing up and start over. I really don't see that anywhere online. We'll talk about that a bit as this video goes, but let's talk about the money, okay? Because again, the reason why this muddies the water a little bit is, a week ago, you're hearing scheduling stuff with Jenna Ortega, and, did she leave because of that? Did she leave because of Melissa? Then the reports came out that, well, she left actually a long time ago, and granted, the report that we're looking at today actually does talk about that Melissa was fired a long time ago, like at least a month plus ago when she started to get vocal on certain things, right? So she actually was fired a while ago, and even before that, Jenna Ortega was not coming back. So that does stay in line with some of the later reporting that we heard last week, right? Started as just an absolute mess and then kind of got a little bit more clear as time went on. Again, I think there's kind of fake stories being planted from executives at Spyglass or whatever that kind of feed information down. I think they're purposely muddying the waters because you still don't really know what in God's name is going on. But again, in this article, you get a little bit more about the money. So I'm going to use Tristan over here at Brittany Vinyl on Twitter, and he summarizes and he also just posts two different pictures that is kind of the crux of the entire article. So one part is talking about the money. Ortega has been paid in the six figures for her previous installments, but her team now wants projects with significant paydays, something the Scream franchise is not known for. Sources say she was seeking high seven figures and anticipated that Spyglass would bulk. Spyglass head Gary Barber is known for his shrewd business sense or for being cheap, depending on what side of the table you're on, multiple sources say. The studio has already lost Scream stalwart Neve Campbell over a salary dispute for this year's Scream 6, with the actress saying at the time that she couldn't walk on set feeling undervalued. Many predicted that the film would fail without its original star, but ended up being the biggest movie in the franchise since the 96 original. Barber's apparent takeaway is that neither stars nor large salaries are essential. He didn't need Neve. He doesn't need Jenna, says one insider. Okay, I want to pause because this does make me really mad. Also, not mentioned in this part, but I believe also mentioned somewhere maybe earlier in the article, both of them, Melissa, I believe, also was paid, and Jenna, both were paid under $1 million, right? So they use the figure amount, six figures, right? So $700,000, $800,000, $900,000. Both of them were not paid $1 million or more in Scream 5 or Scream 6. Now, makes sense for Scream 5 at the very least, right? And also, honestly, depending on how those contracts were, and the report is they signed, kind of two-picture deals, that is actually more like business sense than it is necessarily ripping them off or anything else because, hey, you signed them going into Scream 5. Melissa Barrera is new to this. She's older, but she's new to it, right? So, yeah, I could imagine even though 5 did really well and 6 ended up doing even better, yeah, you still get her on a team-friendly, agreement in terms of, the salary thing, and the team, I guess, being Spyglass and Paramount, right? And then Jenna, she's getting bigger and bigger, but same thing, she's still not that big going into Scream 5, and she's also not the main character. I was going to say maybe not the main star, debatable, right? But she's not the main character. And then going into 6, yeah, her role was elevated. She obviously is much more well-known, but hey, when Wednesday's blowing up, Wednesday blew up right after they had filmed Scream 6, so what are you going to do? She gets paid what she gets paid, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, thinking that and I mean, this is where I would get mad, right? All of that stuff, that makes sense. I do think that's just good business. And just, I mean, you get the people when you get them, and there's not too much you can control outside of that. Now, going into Scream 7, very different story, right? These two are better known. Melissa's been in other things, but generally Scream is her biggest thing. But also, she is the main character. She deserves it. It's her general franchise now for 5 and 6, and the movies have done really well. You know what I mean? So, yeah, she should get paid over $1 million. That's not asking too much. Now, Jenna's thing, I guess if it's true, right? If all of this, what we just read, is true. So the high 7 figures, so that's like $7, $8, $9 million, right? Now, that is a lot. Honestly, I got to be honest, that would be like, okay, the budget for these movies, as we've seen, 30, 35, maybe $40 million, right, for the budget. You have Jenna Ortega coming in, and I mean, she deserves, I'm not saying like she doesn't deserve it, but you have her walking in, and she asks for like $7.5 or $8 million off the jump, and you say no. And like I actually could understand that, to be flat out honest with you. So if it was because of that, like, hey, I am in support of like paying these people for what they're worth. I defended Neve Campbell. I would still defend her right now. But I also get it. If you're going to tell me that 1/4 of the entirety of the budget for Scream 7 is going to one person, well, yeah, like you just flat out really can't do that. That's unrealistic for a horror franchise to do that. So, am I mad that Jenna Ortega is not in it? Yeah. And I think it's ultimately still a stupid move and the wrong move. I think ultimately the movie would get hurt from this. But I do actually get it. Now, did you have to manufacture all this drama because of it? No, not necessarily. Now, a couple other things, though, to dig into, right? Specifically towards the end. Well, number one, like, inflation makes it very hard. Like, when you say 6, and 6 was looked at as, like, the biggest, I think maybe the biggest Scream movie in terms of dollars, but because of inflation, that's not even remotely true. I think even 1 and 2, maybe even 3. Like, if you adjust for inflation, it does beat 5 and 6. So 5 and 6 really aren't the biggest Scream movies. They just look big because tickets are like triple the prices now, as they probably even more than triple, right? But regardless of that, right? The ending of that. So this guy, the head, is either a shrewd businessman or whatever the word they use, tough, bigger vocabulary I can't say, or he's just plain, cheap, right? And so the thinking that you don't need, like, the insider at the very end, right? That he believes, like, hey, you didn't need Neve, you don't need Jenna. What a dumb thing to, like, and that was in quotations, right? So, like, I don't know if he's ever said that out loud, maybe in, like, a board meeting or something, but what a stupid thing to say out loud. Number one, look, I guess, yeah, you didn't need Neve Campbell, and that part of the article, too, where it's like people predicted it would fail. Honestly, very few people predicted Scream 6 would fail without Neve. Like, we were saying it constantly. Did she affect the box office? Maybe. And if she did, maybe a couple million. And I mean couple as in 2. Very little. And that's not any disrespect to Neve. It's what I've constantly said over and over again. Number one, she's not like the biggest star in the world, and that's okay. But number two, in my belief, I don't think actors put people in seats as much as they used to, right? And I think specifically for a movie like this and an actor with her kind of resume, I just really don't think she's worth 20, 30, 40 million in the box office. So I think that was just kind of a stupid line. But the idea that, and people are pointing this out, rightfully so, the idea that, well, you don't need Neve, you don't need Jenna. Well, okay, number one, I do think Jenna actually brought people more than Neve Campbell. And that's just the popularity of Wednesday and Jenna Ortega right now, right? Now, again, like, did she bring in 40 million? No. But did she bring in $5, $6, $7 million to the, like, if she wasn't in it, would they have lost, say, 5 to 10? Maybe. And then if she's in it, did she bring 5 to 10 million? Maybe. Now, there's no way of knowing that, but number one, I don't even think those two are comparable. I think Jenna Ortega flat out is the bigger star. Is she more important to Scream? No. I think, Neve Campbell as Sydney is, but there's a difference between the Scream community and just the at-large community that helps the box office, right? People know Jenna Ortega way more than they know Neve Campbell in the wide audience, okay? So that's just a weird, like, to lump those two together is just weird. And then number two, it also doesn't really make too much sense because I'll tell you this, though. You don't need Jenna, you don't need Neve. I think you need one of them. And I mean, that's more of like the fan side of Scream, because here's where we're at. And here's the next slide, the next part of this article. It's a weird line. I don't believe it actually means they're going a reboot path, but I do want to talk about a reboot. I believe you need one of them. the reason 6 worked is because you built it off of a couple legacy that I don't think people maybe like went to the theaters to specifically just see Courtney Cox, right? But you have them, but then you build it off of Tara and Sam, who you've already established. And for further proof, and this is actually the biggest proof of all, when you launched it, you did the classic Hollywood thing that sometimes works, sometimes really doesn't work. And I think it did work for Scream. You have a passing of the torch moment. Literally, that's what it's called, passing of the torch. Now, they say that in the movie because they're kind of like self-aware, right? But why did you do that? Well, you had a little popularity with your new people, but very little. And ultimately, when you inject new characters into a story, it's better to have the older characters kind of be a part of it. So in 5, you had both. You had both carrying it, whatever like adjective or like word you want to use to describe, right? Like they carried it, they made it work. And then in 6, the reason it worked is because it was still Scream, and you continued the path that you were going down. You removed more of the legacy. Now, the Sydney thing was like like they didn't plan to do that. That kind of just happened on them. But you again, took some steps back from the original 3 at the time, right, for Dewey, Gale, and Sydney. You took a step back, and you focused more on the newcomers. But if you just do a brand new movie, and it's just 90% new people, I do not think that works nearly as well. And some people despise 6. In fact, I'd say it's 50-50 online. For everybody that loves 6, there's somebody that hates it, and that's fine. But it's already a divisive movie. You're telling me you're going to have a brand new movie with just nobody that we've seen before, just all new, and you think that's going to work? There's been a lot of good points made online where, like, Scream is not like some of these other franchises, and I generally agree. Scream is built on, like, legacy and, like, connecting things. And, does that mean you need Sydney for, like, Scream, 17? You might, actually. Like, technically, we don't know. But I don't really think so, but, like, it does help, and definitely where we're at right now. That's how I'm looking at it. Where we're at right now is not the time to do this reboot. So let's read this thing. So they talk about Scream 7 was supposed to end, the trilogy, which makes a lot of sense, okay? While some insiders say the situation is in shambles and very raw, it may not be as dire as it might seem. Scream has always had interchangeable villains behind the mask, ensemble characters, and certain legacy characters. Another reboot will not fatally stab the franchise. Chris Landon remains on board as director, as does James Vanderbilt, who co-wrote the first 2 previous installments. Now, throwing in James and Guy, I don't really think that gives people a lot of hope. People are very down on those 2 writers, and I'm not really going to defend them too much. I think, as we've talked about, they do really good, I think, on characters. I think they can tell and write some really good characters. But yeah, they are all over the place, I think, in terms of writers. So kind of ignoring that last part, the reboot thing is being taken all over the place. People are having it as like their headlines, like articles and stuff, and it's classic journalism where they just are all terrible. Like I talk about it all the time on the channel. Here's the thing, the reboot part is like speculation. Like if you look at where quotes are and whatnot, like that's the author's perspective, and it's okay to like put that in an article, but you got to realize what is like being told to them and that they're reporting on, and then what is their opinion. That part's their opinion. Like the whole it's dire and stuff, that's what some people are saying online, and like the narrative around it, they are saying it's always had interchangeable villains. Now that's true, but they always do connect to something. You can't just throw like a random Joe off the street that's a killer behind the mask with like no motive connecting it to anything. You really can't do that. Like that is not Scream. Although yeah, Ghostface changes each movie, there's still something that kind of connects. And again, that's what people are pointing out online, and I do think that's true. And and like I said, do we need this for Scream 11 or 12? Do we need a 68-year-old Nev Campbell? Like, probably not. But where we're at right now for Scream 7, and I said this last week, this is not the time to do it. Like, that is my hard stance, and I will stand by that for the next, 2 years as we go through the saga. This is not the time to do a reboot. Now, the way that the speculation is almost makes it sound like, well, it's always had legacy characters, it's always had new. So maybe in that way, even when they say a reboot, 5 was a reboot, right? And yet they still had all those original characters. So, maybe you could do another... And I guess that would be, decently okay. Okay, and we've talked about this. How do you do this? Well, without Sam and Tara, right, you have that gone. You either tell a complete Sydney story, which I think would actually be pretty cool, and that's one I would vote for, right? If we had an election, I'd vote for that one. The other choice and I don't think it works any other way, is you do 5 again. And I kind of think that's stupid. Again, that's why I don't really support it. But it is better than just eliminating everybody, because there is the third path, right? Okay, so path 1 is a Sydney story. Path 2 is you do 5 again. So you introduce more new characters, but you have to bring back legacy characters, and you have to connect them again, which I think would feel, just because of the timing, I don't think would work, right? It's an unfortunate situation that they put themselves in, so it's really not all that unfortunate. The third path is to do part of what I just said for rebooting it, Scream 5ing it, but you don't have the legacy characters. And honestly, dead honest, and maybe we'll make a video kind of on this, on my predictions of what they're going to do. The word on the street, right, that if you haven't been on Twitter, haven't been on social media, the word on the street, they've had no communication with Neve Campbell. It's been broken off. If there was communication, it's no longer happening. They're redoing the story. And when they're done with that, they will approach her. Now, the rumor is they definitely want her, but they have not offered her anything. They haven't talked to her, nothing like that, okay? So there is a real possibility that they write this thing, and maybe it is a Sydney-specific thing. They go to Neve, and they cannot work out a deal because, again, they underpay her. And then you have to do Scream 5, a full-on reboot with new characters. You can connect them, I guess, to Legacy, but you would have no Legacy actually there to help you with that. I think that would be a disaster. Now, will I watch it? I think that's a different question, and we'll see. Ultimately, I feel so disgusted about this entire thing. I really don't know, my support level for the future. I don't actually know my support, but that one would receive the least amount of support, or my personal investment, I'd have the least amount doing that, because I just think that's so ridiculous. You know what I mean? And honestly, judging from the first thing that we read, if they underpaid Neve for 6, which, by the way, now that we know Melissa and Jenna were not even paid $1 million, you got to imagine they were coming at Neve with the same kind of thing, offering her 200, 300, 400, however much it was in the 100,000 range. And she probably wanted 1.5, 1, 2, 3 million, and they were off. So I think you can sure, you don't know for sure, but I feel like that's what happened. So I guess the point is, it's very possible that they go to Neve, they offer her $1.2 million to be the lead, and she wants 3, 4, 5. They say no, they break it off, and they just go all young, because what can you do with young actors where you don't have to pay them? And I mean, kind of rightfully so, because they're not known, so why should you? I actually understand that in a sense, but that's what they would do. They would just go all young again, unproven, untapped potential, and just go for that. And yeah, that's, I guess, smart business in terms of signing the contracts, but guess what? When you get into the theaters, that's a different story, and it would be hard, I think, to do this. As I said, to do this without Tara and Sam is already extremely difficult, I believe. And I'm not going to move on that either. I think that was a terrible idea. I think it is possible, though, that it could work without them. I do believe that. However, if you tell me, what do you think about, well, is it possible to do without them, as well as without Gail, Sydney, Kirby, all of them, the odds are even lower. So to me, this is going to be very interesting how things play out, because if they don't get Neve, they are kind of screwed. And if they're not willing to pay Neve, that could be the bit. It's just pay her, for the love of God, because you really got nothing else right now. So just do it, right? We'll see what happens ultimately. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.